It was on
All
before.
right, now it's recording. Morning, everybody. I'm
Good morning.
Emily,
I'm Greg.
and we are drinking. I'm having a chai charger.
I'm having hot chocolate because it's cold out.
It is very cold out today, but it's like my favorite fall weather because like layers. I love layers. I love sweater weather, and it's not quite cold enough to snow, but it's getting there. So very
It's
excited.
getting too cold to sit out on the patio and read.
Yeah, it is. I had to put my hammock in my yard away just because it was getting frosty outside in the mornings. And I'm like, well, I mean, it's hard to read comfortably on a hammock when it's that cold. But I was able to get a lot of stuff in my garden done. I was able to put down some of my herbs and things like that. I transplanted some of my herbs into pots this past week, so I have some herbs inside now, so I can have fresh herbs all winter long. So, but yeah, it's fall, and
It's
winter is coming.
It's coming.
Not to have a pun for any Game of Thrones lines or anything. Winter is coming. But yeah,
But it's like that in Wisconsin.
it is, yeah. We can appreciate the season changes at least. Snow is inevitable when you live in the Midwest. But anyway, I feel like I've finished a lot of books this week. Books that I have been trying to finish forever.
Well, then you go first.
I finished that Joan of Arc book finally.
Oh, yes.
I finally finished that one up. I was extremely excited. It was really good history, I think. I had never known all the details of the Joan of Arc situation and like the political dynamic. I just thought it was all like church superstition and that kind of bullshit. But it's a lot more complicated than that, and I felt like the author did a really great job of simplifying the complexities in a way that an average reader could understand, and it felt more like storytelling and less like a history book, which I super appreciated. They still kind of threw dates at you, but they threw like generalized dates at you. It wasn't like precise dates or anything. They just kind of said in the year blah 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 1420 or whatever, you know, that kind of thing. So it was really well done. I enjoyed that one a lot, just because I thought it was such an interesting history, and what an unlikely character, like what an unlikely person to be this big revolutionary in France, especially during wartime. She was like, what, I think like 16 when she first went to war, or something like that. She was very young, and when she was put on trial, she was 19. So she was extremely young. Also a female, had no idea about war, and somehow was able to successfully rally the troops and make war plans and stuff, and basically help perpetuate political efficacy in France, which was divided between the French and the English still, and they were duking it out for who actually rightfully had the throne. And she was like, oh, it's definitely the French king. Born and bred, the bloodline, we're gonna keep it, God said so. And just like held on to her convictions so hard that she was willing to die for them. So I thought that was really a cool and inspirational story, that despite all the political things, sometimes the right thing to do is just the right thing to do. And I thought that was a really cool story. I had actually gotten involved in reading this book because I had read a smaller pamphlet off of Project Gutenberg about it that was extremely summarized. So I'm like, okay, there's got to be more to it than this. But it was called something to the effect of Joan of Arc, the Witch Saint. And I was like, how do you reconcile those two statements together? But I felt like the book really did a great job of kind of telling you everything that went on, and like all the theologians who got involved who were trying to figure this out. She was actually tried by the English, technically. The French didn't have really much against her, so it was the English who captured her and then tried her.
Well,
and of course,
she kicked their ass.
yeah, because she kicked their ass. Literally, that was what it was. It was over a grudge. It was all over a grudge over this, about how we had a lady kick our butts. That's really what it was. And so they just found every which way of condemning her. And so when there was the retrial with the church, it wasn't just Joan, like it wasn't Joan on trial anymore. It was everyone who ever knew her coming forward and putting these theologians and judges on trial.
Oh boy.
And so it was really interesting because like everyone who was ever knew her was like, this is the most wonderful person we ever knew. Like, she's, you know, yeah, she was a cocky teenager, but at least, like, she was extremely devout. It was just really cool to see all these different testimonies from all these people that knew her personally, to come forward and be like, yeah, we know she was tried wrongly. We know that the English had a vendetta, and we knew her as a person, and she did not deserve this. It was just really cool to kind of see how her character vouched for her through all these other people and lives she touched, which was a cool, I think, testament to her life and how she lived, even though she was so young and didn't have a lot of life experience.
Yeah.
So that was a really cool read. Finished that one up. Finished up The Shining. That was really good. We're going to do a review of that. Really enjoyed that one, though. That's the first Stephen King I've ever read. Ever.
That's my third.
Yeah, your third, my first. And I was very impressed with it. I liked it a lot. I mean, I knew Stephen King was good, and there were some parts that were super predictable, but it seemed like that was very intentional.
Yeah.
Like, he wanted you to know that this is what's going to happen in the end, but I want you to watch the train wreck. It's not about how it ends. It's about the train wreck getting there, which I appreciated. So I finished reading that one. I got through, I have the complete short stories of Charlotte Perkins Gilman that I'm working through, and there were some really good ones in there. I just read a short story called According to Solomon that I thought was really good as well, because, like, I know you and I are going to be doing a review of The Rocking Chair, but I like this one because it's a husband who likes to throw scripture at his wife a lot, like quote proverbs and all these things, and like in the end she ultimately gets the best comeback by also throwing scripture back at him and justifying what she's been doing. And it was really interesting because it's like this cool concept of how people can use the Bible to their own agendas. But in this one, it was interesting because he was the one using it for his own agenda, but the second something she did hurt his pride, she was using it in the correct context. And and so it was better, like, she had the better argument in the end. And it was just really fun, like, because I come from a religious background where I feel like women are persecuted a lot, and people throw scripture at you all the time for, trying to justify why they're mad at you for something or whatever, or why you're doing something wrong. And it was just really funny because she was completely in the right theologically, as well as, like, making her own life decisions and trying to, better her household and things like that by making these decisions. And all he was doing was using it to perpetuate and salvage his pride. So I really liked that story. That was a good one. There are a few other really good ones in there, but they didn't hit me the same way as that one did, because that one was really, like, hit close to home, because I feel like, having grown up in the church, that was a big issue that kind of was always a problem.
How many stories are in this book?
I want to say like 40, because a lot of them are like 40 or more, because they're really short.
Yeah.
A lot of them are only a few pages long, but still have really deep philosophical, like, impressions and stuff. It's been really fun to read, though.
Because yesterday I was looking into her bibliography.
Yeah.
And she actually wrote something like 146 short stories. But in what I was reading, it appended it saying, but most literary critics don't count the majority of them.
Yeah. I think that's so silly, because it was an early feminist. Like, before feminism even had a name, she was one. And all of her stories touch on women's issues.
Well,
there isn't a single
suffragettes.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So, like, she really, I can see how people would be very aggravated, because she comes up with a lot of very controversial living situations for women. Like, in one of her short stories, all these young ladies were artists. Okay. And they all decided, like, we love living together in this dorm. Why don't we just keep doing it forever? Like, why don't we just go and, like, invest in a piece of real estate and all live there and remodel it and make it like art studios? And then we just, you know, if we want to get married, we can, but they have to be okay with living in the same space as the rest of us, like the rest of us. And it wasn't like a weird, like polyamorous thing, or it wasn't like anything that controversial. It was just these women deciding to do very intentional artistic life together. And that was so unusual because back in the day, like, a lot of people were very upset when women would get together. Like, the women's tea party was extremely controversial when it started happening. Because how dare these women come together and have, like, their own lives, and how dare they, you know, how dare they swap their own ideas, and how dare they conspire against their own husbands, and all this other stuff. Like, it was extremely controversial. So it's just kind of cool because she speaks to all these women's issues that were... Today we think, wow, that doesn't seem like it should be that controversial. Like, it just seems practical that a bunch of women who are artists would pool their money together and try to, like, live creatively with one another, and like, and they had their own separate apartments and everything, and they had their own studios, but like, it was a big deal. Also, female artists in general, very controversial. So it was really interesting how she touches on these things that today it's like, that doesn't seem like it would be a big deal, but for her time, you didn't do that. You were probably a witch if you lived with other women or lesbians undercover or something, and that was extremely controversial. So it was really, I'm really enjoying her work though, because she has a lot of older women as heroines in their stories, and I appreciate that because a lot of the time older women were the ones, like, if your husband died, you weren't worth anything. You remarried and that was it. And so she has a lot of strong older women who just figured it out and never had to remarry. Or they remarried but they still were fiercely independent and things like that, which I appreciate because I feel like in her time there weren't a lot of older women who were strong like that. You just kind of did whatever you had to survive, and most of the time if you couldn't get hired because you were an older lady, you just remarried whether you were in love or not to save your status, so to speak, and financially support yourself. So it's really cool to kind of see that difference in opinion. So if you're an older lady, I actually recommend a collection of her work if you can get your hands on some of her short stories, because I feel like it's very empowering for like middle-aged and older women. So highly recommend it. Really good stuff. So I'm almost, I think, a little more than halfway through that. I'm really enjoying it. And this is only like her selected works. This isn't like a full, all of her work kind of thing.
Right.
But it's good.
Well, even I've got a digital copy of an ebook called Complete Works of Charlotte Perkins Gilman, but looking up her bibliography, most of her short stories aren't in there. It's that same thing. Where there's, and it said right on this page, they're not considered to have literary merit, most of them that she published in her own magazine during World War I, which I think is okay. Let us read them and judge for ourselves.
Yeah, seriously. Like, who
Don't
are,
just write it on.
who are you to tell
it,
me?
It could be a situation where she's being discriminated against because most of her work at that time was more feminist.
Yeah. And
As
you never
opposed to
know.
the earlier works that were a little less so, like The Rocking Chair.
Yeah. And it's just so interesting how she weasels even something that doesn't seem like it's a women's issue thing, it still is a women's issue thing. Like, it's a subtle undertone, but she does it so well that it's very relatable. And as a female, I feel like her work is hitting me very differently than I think, like, say, if my brothers read it or something, or if it might hit you differently because you're a male. But it's very relatable.
Okay.
It's very human and relatable. But there's a lot of gaslighting too, which I think everybody experiences at some point in their life, where somebody disvalues your opinions or things like that. So I think there's still a very human aspect that it's still relatable there. But for the most part, it seems very specifically women's issues, and I am appreciating it a lot. And I'm appreciating the bravery she had to write that kind of stuff and publish it openly under her own name. Like, that was a big deal. So yeah, it's been really good. I really enjoyed that one. So yeah, that's kind of, I think.
So that's 3. And you finished another one.
Yeah, I finished A for Andromeda.
And you
And I
did a
put
video
that,
on that.
yep, video and that posted last Friday. Liked that one a lot.
And I gotta ask you, did you realize there's a sequel to this?
I did not.
Okay.
I had originally just thought that this was the only one in the series because I didn't think they had a second season of the show that they were basing this off
Well,
of.
they didn't call it A for Andromeda. They called it the Andromeda Breakthrough.
Okay.
So a different title, but it was
Okay.
a second season.
Yeah.
And both books are really just novelizations of the TV series.
Yeah, and I haven't found the TV series anywhere. I kind of wanted to see.
Most of those old BBC shows have been lost.
Sad. If anybody has BritBox, if you could find A for Andromeda, because I don't have BritBox, which is a shame, because I feel like that's
but
all
even
I'd
if you
ever
do,
watch.
Like a lot of the early Doctor Who, all the way up to Tom Baker, a lot of those are lost.
Yeah.
Because they threw away the tapes, and it wasn't digital, so it hasn't been preserved.
Okay. Well, if it's out there, somebody send me a link, because I would
Yeah.
love to watch this show. But the book was really good. I felt like it touched on a lot of questions of what it means to be human.
Okay.
And it's a combination artificial intelligence versus like alien intelligence, which I thought was unique, where they needed the alien intelligence in order to communicate with the computer more effectively and vice versa.
Okay.
So it was really cool because it's like they artificially built a human, essentially, after a series of very unfortunate events. And it just speaks so much to like the human spirit. There's a lot about sexuality in there
Okay.
and like how that makes humans tick. There's a lot about fear and emotion and how that makes humans tick and like what drives that. There's a lot of like espionage stuff because this is very like Cold War vibes going on. It's really well done, and you don't absolutely love any of the characters because they are all so flawed, which felt very realistic to me, and they're all just trying to do whatever they can. And some of them are just doing their job, and some of them are not. My phone's going off. Let me turn that off because it's going to be annoying.
And one of you is calling in right now.
Yeah, it's Walgreens. Your prescriptions are ready. Oh, thanks.
Cool.
Thanks, guys. You've only been harassing me for 5 days, and I haven't run out yet. I love when they do that. But A for Andromeda, I felt like was really good at just speaking to the human spirit. Yeah, I got this in one of my vintage box hauls that I bought on eBay.
I looked it up. This is first edition.
Is it really?
Yes.
Oh, yay. I like first editions.
It's in really nice shape.
Yeah, it really is.
Caring
And even
for
the dust jacket is
dust
not.
jacket.
Yeah, it's not
Really
bad.
leaning to the spine.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Yeah, I felt like it was really well done. And the pages aren't super yellowed. So, I mean,
No,
somebody took
the
good
pages
care
are
of it.
Very white. I've seen new books that looked like that.
Yeah. It's a really. It's very. I feel like for such a short book, it poses a lot of very deep questions about humans
Well,
and what that means.
it
to
always
be
bugs me when people call these older books short, because this was the standard back then.
Yeah, like
100
200 pages.
Yeah, 200 pages, more than 250, and it
Yeah.
was super long.
And it's kind of a shame that it took so long for me to read it, but I had a lot of life
yeah,
happening.
there was a lot interfering.
Yeah.
But yeah, this thickness of a book was traditional for the 1950s, 1960s, even the 1970s, with rare exceptions like Dune or Samuel Delaney's Dahlgren. Some of Heinlein's books like Stranger in Strange Land got
Yeah.
really long, but the majority of them were only 200 pages.
Yeah. So it was a very insightful read. And like, yeah, there was a little bit of that 1950s and 60s sexism in it, but it's no more than you experience at a modern day bar now.
Yeah,
Really, the way I've looked at it. Not that that justifies it, but
right.
it wasn't so blatantly. It was there for the drama, and you knew it, because there's a complex, like, kind of semi-romantic relationship going on between one of the security personnel sent by the government she's there as PR
Yeah.
to try and like watch and keep an eye on people for national security purposes. And the top scientist, Fleming, who's kind of a womanizer, but it's because he's a tormented, intelligent man and uses those things as that and alcohol as an escapism.
Yeah.
So, like I said before too, like none of the characters are they're not lovable characters. They're all super.
Looks like we cleared the place out.
They're super flawed humans. I know, like everybody's suddenly gone. Morning's over. Time to go move on. But yeah, it was just a really good read and felt very realistic, like for how something like this, like a situation like this would be addressed, because there's all the military wants to use everything to their advantage, and economists want to use this computer and this person that it built essentially to figure out and solve all kinds of economical problems, and it's just this use and abuse of this resource when the resource itself is also corrupted, because it's like, you're all imperfect, we might as well just destroy you because y'all suck. So I really appreciated it a lot. It was a good read, a fun read.
So I found the Andromeda Breakthrough and have it ordered, and it's probably on its way shipping here now.
Yay. Round 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even know there was a sequel. I'm excited. Because
I
it
didn't
kind of
really know
leaves
that
off
either.
on a cliffhanger.
Yeah, so that makes sense. That there'll be another
But it's
one.
enough of a cliffhanger that it has enough closure where you're just like,
Yeah, sometimes science fiction novels will end with leaving you with questions to think about, which is really good.
yeah, it didn't feel like I didn't have any closure, really. It just felt like it's a cliffhanger. Like, anybody who watches anime knows that a lot of anime ends like very abruptly, leaving you with kind of a go ahead and guess what you think happens next, and they don't come up with sequels.
Yeah.
And I felt like that's kind of what this did, where it gave you just enough closure, but enough that it could be open-ended. So I didn't suspect that there was a second season, but it seemed like there could be another book to continue this, or another season of the show
Okay.
from the way it ended. So, but I didn't question it because I was like, yay, I finally finished it. Only to be wrong. There's more.
Only one more.
Only
it's
one
not
more.
like it's a 30-book series like you get today.
Yeah. Those get overwhelming, man. I usually make a rule that there's only a few series that I've made exceptions to,
Yeah.
where I typically only stick with trilogies. Just because I don't have the attention span to keep dedicating.
Yeah.
Like, even when I buy TV shows and stuff, I don't go beyond a certain amount of seasons.
Exactly.
Just because
Well,
it's too much time investment.
and just the same thing over and over and over again. You find yourself, there's so much else out there. You want
Yeah.
to move on and try something
Yeah,
different.
I don't want to be stuck. I don't want to be that committed to something that's temporal, is
Exactly.
really how it feels. Like, a lot of my friends who are really into anime love Naruto. Naruto goes on forever. There are hundreds of episodes, hundreds of them, and I'm like, season 2 is where I ended it, and then I'm like, okay, I'll watch the last episode, because everything in between is just, I don't know, it's just a lot of time dedication, and I don't feel like I have enough to dedicate to that.
Yeah, like I say, I'm like that too. Like when you and Samantha were talking about the Wheel of Time series, I'm like, no.
I didn't realize how long it was, but one of my friends on Goodreads is reading it, and he just finished book number 16, and I was like, oh, yeah, no, not for me. No, thank
Well,
you.
and then if you read reviews of it, going through the whole series, the first book
Yeah.
they criticized for being just an imitation of Lord of the Rings.
Oh,
And then after that, things get a little better, but then
Yeah.
the middle books, like the middle 5 books, everybody hates. And then finally, when Brandon Sanderson took over the series, now they like him again. And it's like, why bother?
yeah,
It's just commercial bullcrap.
yeah. And that's actually, I won't lie, that's kind of what I thought with Stephen King at first and why I hadn't read him is because a lot of people are like, oh, his stuff's really good. He's kind of an asshole and arrogant, but his stuff's really good. And I'm like, yeah, but he's written so much.
Yeah.
How much of it is actually really good and just them capitalizing off of his name?
Well, that's the thing. The Shining and
I always
the other
question
two I read, Carrie and the Dead Zone, they're all his early works before. Well, I mean, by the time he wrote the Dead Zone, he was already pretty famous, but you know, he was still in the beginning of his career as a writer, and he hadn't really gotten to that point where he can write his grocery list and sell it to a publisher. You know?
Yeah, seriously. I had questioned that because, like, Dean Koontz is another one. I see so many Dean Koontz books in thrift stores when I'm going thrifting.
Yeah.
And his name's real big on the cover, and the title's like this small, and I'm like, okay, at a certain point, when are they continued to write? Like, when did they stop being good that you had to capitalize on the name? That's what always, like, as a designer, that's what I think of when it comes to marketing books and stuff, is like, did they stop being good and now you're just capitalizing on the name, or do they continue to be good?
It's not really a reflection of the quality. It's a reflection of, like, Isaac Asimov's later novels are good novels.
Yeah.
But it was his name that sold the book.
Yeah.
He was so famous. He was on TV all the time. And,
Yeah.
in all the magazines and stuff, and everybody knew him, and everybody loved his books. And so when he started writing more novels again in the 1980s, they made his name bigger than the title because his name was what was marketable.
Yeah. But I always wonder, too, is like, I guess as a child who has grown up now, where we're constantly being bombarded with advertisement.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of heading into brand ambassadorship as well, where we're being bombarded with ads from people we follow who might be our friends on Instagram or people we follow on social media, where it doesn't look like an ad, but we know it is. So we're constantly, like, I'm constantly suspicious of how much I'm being advertised to and how and why. And I keep paying attention to those trends. And so, like, that had been my biggest hang-up with Stephen King, is, like, is he really still good? Or are they just selling by his name?
Yeah.
And he's kind of just doing more of the same. And so I've been very suspicious to pick up a Stephen King book because it's like, how do they do that? Same with
Like
Dean
I say,
Koontz.
back to those first three books, Carrie, Salem's Lot, and The Shining.
Yeah.
They made him famous, but he wasn't famous when he wrote them. Carrie especially, he was throwing it out.
Yeah.
And his wife pulled it out of the wastebasket and said,
Yeah.
you should send this to a publisher. And so he did, and it just hit big.
Yeah. After having read The Shining, I kind of see a lot of people like, oh, he's an arrogant asshole. I'm like, he can afford to be. That was good. He knows he's good.
Yeah.
Even if he's being very self-critical, it's because he knows he's good and wouldn't want to put out crap. So it's one of those things where it's like, now I'm a little less skeptical. I actually picked up some Stephen King books recently from a thrift store that I saw because that's my favorite way to find new books.
Yeah.
But yeah, just the suspicion of being advertised to and how big a name gets. Like, is that enough? Is that enough for literature? And is that enough to get people to buy it? And it must be, because people are still reading Dean Koontz, and people are still reading Stephen King, and people are still reading
Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
That's another
Nicholas
one.
Sparks. See his stuff in thrift stores all the time, but he's number one seller. He's a top seller. People like his stuff.
But, you know, it's always been true. I mean, John Steinbeck was a big name because of certain novels, not all of his novels were at that same quality.
Yeah.
But they're all pretty good.
Yeah.
Ernest Hemingway's another one. His name was big. Not all of his novels are great.
Yeah.
All of his novels are good, but they're not all at the level of For Whom the Bell Tolls.
John Updike is another one. He's a great writer.
Very popular.
Very popular.
And
His name
sold
sells.
books.
Yep. His name sells. William Gibson is kind of becoming that now too, I think.
Yeah.
Like, I love his work. I really enjoy his work, but you're starting to see more of his name being bigger on the front panel and the titles being a lot smaller. You're just starting to realize, like, oh, it's a name that's selling now.
Yeah.
But
But that's just marketing. The author is still just trying to tell the stories. I mean, maybe some authors give in to publisher marketing and write books that'll sell, but
Yeah.
I think in science fiction mostly you get people that really have some ideas and visions that they want to put in writing, and you know, how it gets marketed is
Yeah.
separate from that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I can definitely see that, and I feel like I think it's just my generation is very suspicious of how much consumerism and how much we're being bombarded with advertisements, and we're starting to just become more wary of those things.
Well, that's why stuff like BookTube and social media has become so popular, because it's not advertising. Nobody's paying us to push these books.
Yeah, we're
You
just
can't
doing it
send
because we
money.
love
We
them,
have our address
or
somewhere.
we hate them, and we really want you to know they suck.
Yeah.
We've only had a couple of those, thankfully, though. That hideous book. I mean, Strength. What was another one? What was the other one we really didn't like?
Castle of Otranto.
Yeah, that was the other one we really didn't like.
Yeah. But that one stands as a corner, as a rock that has been pushed way into the ground, thankfully,
By so
by
many
the
other...
foundation, the beautiful foundation that's been built on top of it.
It's the floor of the very deep basement when it comes to haunted houses,
Yeah.
so to speak.
It's like if a TV commercial inspired all the writers out there to do their best work,
Yep.
but the TV commercial is absolute crap.
Yep.
That's the Castle of Otranto.
Yep, that's it. That's it in
By
a
somebody
nutshell.
who wasn't even a writer and didn't really know how to write,
Yeah.
and really was trying to be Shakespeare and failed miserably.
That's pretty much all I have read lately and kind of finished, finally. And of course, I finished The Shining and added 3 more books to my readers list
but
on
like you say, all
Goodreads.
3 books together are shorter than the Shining.
Yes,
so
yes. Actually, all 3 of them are actually less
they're not.
pages. Yeah.
They're not as depressing.
No, well, one of them
one
is.
is, yeah.
One's called Dying, and it's a memoir about a woman who had cancer, which I'm very eager to read it because the first page is her admitting that she bought a personal euthanasia kit from China to end her own life when she was ready. So I was like, ooh, I kind of want to know if she ends up using it or not. Or if
And she died
makes-
and then she wrote the book.
her ghost did.
Okay.
You know,
Ghost
it's kind of
writers,
one of
yeah.
those things. Yeah, it's kind of one of those things though. Like, is this novel her confession, like her suicide note, so to speak? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know
Or
yet.
Maybe she decided not to.
Yeah, but
Decided
it's a-
there was something to
Yeah,
live for.
really interesting perspective on death. So really interesting to see how that goes. Yeah,
Okay.
let's talk about you. What have you been up to?
Well, of course, I finished The Shining.
Yes.
We both
Whoop.
did, and loved it. We'll
Very
be
good.
doing a video, probably up on Friday. The others I read, and then there were none. I think I talked about that in the last of these coffee book videos,
Yep,
though.
you mentioned that.
We should do one in the future on that, because that was a brilliant book. I think you will love it.
Okay, I would love to read it.
And we gotta test you, see if you can get it before the end.
I do.
Or let's say if you can get it before 3/4 of the way through.
Ooh, that's fair.
Yeah.
I can do that.
After that, I think there's a good chance, but before the 75% mark, I think it's really tough to figure that one out. And
I don't know. There have been some where like the very introduction of the character
oh yeah,
who
like
did
the
it, you're
Ravens.
just like it's that one. I did that with Sharp Objects. I read that with my book club. The second they introduced one of the characters, I'm like, it's her. She did it. Spoiler alert. It's a female character.
There's
And you'll
more
know the
than one,
second you meet her, you'll just know. But that was also still a really good book. It just, was predictable to me.
right? The knife
sec-
behind her back was the giveaway, right?
Just how demented she was.
Oh,
Like, there were 2 options, 2 potential murderers. And the second they introduced the second one to me, I'm like, it's that one. That one's the psycho. This one's just a narcissist. This one's fucked up.
yeah, but you can be demented without actually killing anybody. Jack didn't in The Shining.
It was very obvious in this one. Very
He
obvious.
tried, but he
Yeah.
never succeeded in actually
Nope.
killing anybody.
No, but it wasn't technically Jack. It was.
Was it?
Because he said I love you, didn't he? At the end there. So it wasn't technically Jack, in my opinion. Anyway, we'll talk about that more in that video.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's a whole big can of worms to open on that
Yep.
one. And there will be plenty of spoilers because we can't really do justice talking about that one without. But it's such a famous and so old, coming up on 50 years old. I think we can spoil
Yeah, and it's so
the hell
different
out
from the movie.
of it. Yeah.
We have to talk about that. So, but anyway, and then there were none.
So that was a great book. I think it should be on the top tales list.
Okay.
But I
Yeah,
do
we'll
want you to
definitely
read
read
it.
it. I'll
I'm
definitely
currently
read it.
reading Halloween Party with Samantha.
Mm-hmm.
And this one too, I don't think it's as good as And Then There Were None. And Then There Were None was one of her earlier books written in the 1930s. This
Yeah.
one was published in 1967, I think.
Okay.
67 or 69, so 30 years later.
Yeah.
And it feels different. But there is the same thing where pretty much everybody's a suspect. You know,
Y'all did it.
everybody has a good
They
reason.
were all in on it.
And everybody is lying. And that's why Joe said you probably won't be able to figure out Agatha Christie, because she puts suspicion on everyone and leaves it there through most of the book.
Yeah.
And so, you know, every one of the main characters has a good reason for being the suspect. But
I feel
of
like
course,
if
only one of them is.
I feel like if I read this book, the movie Murder by Death will make more sense.
Yeah, because that was kind of a spoof.
Yeah, it was a spoof of all of them, and I didn't pick up on everything. I love Truman Capote, though, in that movie.
Yeah.
Because he's, how dare you add characters 5 minutes before the book ends, and they didn't. I love that part. Yeah. Anyway.
I haven't seen that in years, but that was a good movie.
I watched it twice recently just because it's so good. Maggie Smith, man. Whew. She was
One
a
of these days
knockout.
we gotta read
Still is.
one of Capote's books, In Cold Blood. I've always wanted to read that.
I read excerpts from it in high school. That was a good one.
I haven't even seen the movie. I just heard about it.
Yeah, I read the excerpts because it was, you know how, like, when you're in high school, they just do, like, very shortened excerpt versions of stories in your textbook as, like, this is an American icon or whatever, you know, whatever kind of thing, and throw it in there. So I had read excerpts from it, but I've not read the whole thing. And honestly, I don't remember most of it other than some guy did a moida and Truman wanted to write the story.
Yeah. Yeah, true story.
A true story. True crime.
I want to read that. And from the same era, Psycho, I want to get a hold of a copy of that and read it. But others that I read Foundation. Read the whole Foundation trilogy way back in 1978. And absolutely loved it. And have always wanted to reread it, especially since he wrote more Foundation books in the 1980s. And I just never have until now, of course, that the series came out on Apple TV. I wanted to read at least the first book before I watched any of the series. And reading it today, I can see where a lot of younger readers, the Harry Potter generation, would not like it because it's not action-packed.
Oh, see, I don't mind that personally.
It doesn't, you know, there's a lot of talk on YouTube about writers need to show it, not tell it. Well, Asimov didn't show it; he told it.
Yeah. I feel like Stephen King does the same thing. There's
But
some action.
Stephen King does have events happening, but I mean, Isaac Asimov is literally 80% of the book. There are some events happening, but he doesn't put you in the action. Instead, what he does is he puts you in somebody's office with the two characters saying, well, this planet attacked this planet and blew them all up, and everybody's fleeing against the state, you know.
Okay.
It's like a bunch of office political discussions.
It's still fun. I really like dry literature, though.
Well, I mean, it makes it real easy to put on the radio because the characters are talking the whole time. But it makes it really difficult for somebody growing up with action-packed stuff like Star Wars, Star Trek, Harry Potter, where you're in the action, seeing the battle all the time instead of being 500 light years away discussing it. So that makes it a really tough sell to today's reader. But there's still just something about that book that is why people at the time absolutely fell in love with it. And it actually got a Hugo Award in the 1960s for the best all-time science fiction series. You know, there is something compelling to the ideas and the characters and the way Asimov presents things that is, it makes it great. It's different from what people would write today, but it's still great if you take it on its own terms. It's a brilliant book. If you try to judge it on what you're used to reading, you're going to hate it. But if you take it on its own terms, on its own ground, on what Asimov was doing, it's a brilliant book.
Okay. I'll have to try it.
The only weakness is the same problem I had with Nightfall.
Uh-oh.
It all feels like you're in 1940s Chicago. It doesn't feel like he doesn't build a world that feels like it's 10,000 years in the future.
Yeah. He kind of makes it feel like his time,
Yeah,
modern
I mean, people
times.
drive up in a car. 10,000 years from now? Seriously? They're
Cars?
driving up in a car?
Maybe a
on
car's a
road?
hovercraft.
No.
They just keep calling it a car.
No, he doesn't.
There's
Well, he
wheels?
calls it a ground car, but yeah, as far as you can tell, it's just like an ordinary sedan. So, that's a weakness of his, is that his world building is kind of absent.
Yeah. It's kind of stuck. He's stuck in his own time, and it's like,
Yeah.
all these things have changed, but... Well, I feel like that's kind of what steampunk and dieselpunk do, too. And even cyberpunk, where you're kind of stuck in a type of time frame. Cyberpunk being a little bit more futuristic, but like steampunk is like, they have all the modern conveniences, it's all just clockwork. Or like dieselpunk, where everything's kind of a diesel machine, very much like Mortal Instruments and things like that, where you kind of got these very mechanical, like vehicle-esque things, and they're run by gasoline and diesel and petroleum products and things like that. But the era doesn't really change other than that. You're kind of, it's still very Victorian England and everything steampunk with modern conveniences and computers, and it's just a typewriter keyboard kind of thing. I feel like that's done a lot.
Yeah, but at the same time, Asimov's contemporaries were writing about future histories that felt like the future.
Yeah.
At the time. I mean, now they're not the future. Things have happened differently, but at the time, their stories felt like they were taking you to a future world.
Yeah.
Asimov's just don't.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like the future. It feels way too familiar. The way people talk. I mean, like in Nightfall, a reporter from the newspaper comes in. Wait a minute, this is on an alien world on a far distant star, and they have paper newspapers like we had in the 1940s? No, I don't buy that. You know?
I could appreciate it still, though. It makes it feel, that feeling of familiarity, I feel like it adds probably a level of relatability, at least for me.
It does, it does. But it also kills the whole idea of science fiction to try and imagine how things would be different.
I feel like the Twilight Zone did that a lot, too. It's like you find out it's on an alien world at the end of it, but it looks like 1950s America.
Yeah, well, Bradbury did that, but he did it on purpose and made it really, really work. Where he would set the story on Mars, but there were these Martians that were creating this illusion like they were in Illinois in the 1940s at their grandma's house or something, you know? And, you know, so he wrote his stories so that he could talk about his world and his childhood.
Yeah.
And yet still make it science fictional, and it worked the way he did it.
Cool. So did you read the whole trilogy already, or did you just read the first one?
I just got through Foundation. I wanted to read through the other two and then continue on with all the new books.
Cool. I think I have some of those. I have so many thrift store books that I bought that I just got to paw through all my library stuff again. But I think I have the Foundation trilogy.
Okay.
I should probably
You
look
should read
into
it.
that.
Then we can do a proper video.
Yeah, that would be fun. All right.
Okay. And I read The Rocking Chair. We're going to do a video on that one. That was very good. What else? I've been continuing to read Breathe, but there's just so much going on, and so many other things I'm being pulled into reading
Yeah.
that I just haven't made much progress on. But I want to try and finish that maybe this week.
Yeah, that's that one about the woman who has cancer.
Yeah, her husband has cancer and dies.
Yeah.
And the second half of the book is her in her widow life and dealing with it. And she's kind of demented. And it gets very strange. But it's, for anybody that's dealt with parents or spouses that have grown old and gotten dementia or anything, it's spot on and very powerful. And
Yeah. Hits close to home, too. Might be a little sugary for some people.
yeah, it's a lot to deal with, but it's something that she went through with her husband. He died.
Yeah.
I don't know of what, but he had died a few years, like in the 2012 or something like that.
Yeah.
And so she's drawing upon her own personal experience and feelings, but then kind of taking them to
Adding the
an
psychosis
extreme.
element.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
And it's all stuff that could really happen. So
Yeah.
it's what people can actually go through in these situations. So it's powerful.
Cool.
But it's also,
Heavy.
it's heavy, so it's not a fast read.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was running into with some of the books I was previously, because some of the stuff in here in Ava Andromeda gets pretty heavy, and it's like, kind of need a break for a minute, because I had a lot of heavy things happening in my own life at that point, so it's like, and I need a breather.
So that's what I loved about Foundation. Is it wasn't anything depressing. It wasn't horror. It was space fantasy,
Yeah.
space opera,
Yeah,
science fiction.
something very other. I like that.
It was just a fun book to read. And Asimov has this style that makes him perfectly suited to science writing, because he can take the most difficult ideas and word them in a way that you go, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
You just get it. Where other people, you're trying to read what they're talking about and you just get lost and you have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But Asimov was brilliant enough that, and he didn't dumb it down.
Yeah.
All
He
the
kept it
details were there.
complicated, but he just explained it concisely.
Some of his science articles, like when I was trying to understand diffraction patterns in my physics class, he happened to publish a science article on it.
Oh.
It had all the same math as my physics book, but I couldn't understand my physics book to save my soul. I read Asimov's science article and just, it was obvious.
Oh, that's what
It
they
was
were
just
trying
clear.
to say.
And he had all the math, that same math there, so I just understood.
Yeah. I like when minds can at least do that, because that's kind of how I felt with this Joan of Arc book too. It's like the history, as complicated as it was simplified enough that it didn't degrade me for not understanding the politics. It just explained them so well and concisely
Yeah.
that you're like, oh, okay. A lot of it too is just like, it's a pissing contest between these two powers. Ready, set, go. But yeah, when it comes to science, it probably gets a lot more complicated. I'd be afraid that'd be over my head, but it sounds like it really isn't.
Like I say, it depends on who wrote it. If you got somebody like Asimov writing the science, you're going to understand it. You don't have to be a super genius.
Yeah.
And that was the brilliance of Asimov's writing, is that he made it obvious that you don't have to have a sky-high IQ to get science.
Yeah. That's
It's all in
nice.
how you explain it.
Yep. Awesome. So what else have you been chucking your way through?
That's it.
Okay.
That's where I've gotten. That's a lot.
Yeah, that was a lot, because you got all those 3 Stephen Kings done
Yeah.
in that
Yeah, in the
omnibus
past
you
month.
had,
In the past month, since about September 20th. I read 3 Stephen King books. Well, in the omnibus, I still have Salem's Lot.
Okay. Yeah.
The Dead Zone was a separate book.
Yeah.
And I read those 3. I read Foundation. And then they were done. I read those short stories. I read Cosmic Horror Monthly magazine. and started and read a little Breathe. And started on the distance. That's more reading than I usually do.
Yeah, you really truck through a lot
Usually,
of
if
stuff.
I get one
You're
or two
outdoing
books
me in
completed,
books in a month right now, which is good.
but I'm
Impressive.
enjoying it, and I view it as my work for
Yeah.
Telltale.
Yep, and that's
Even
kind of
if
how I
it's something
view
I'm
it
reading
too.
for fun, it still relates to what we're doing here.
It absolutely
Where we wanna
does.
go.
I think that's the one thing I had been concerned about when we first started Telltale, is that I used to really struggle with assigned reading. But
Yeah.
nothing we've done so far really felt assigned, except those 2 books we really didn't like. Where we just trudged through just to be like, holistically, this is why we hate it, not just, I ended at chapter 5 and here's why I hated it up to chapter 5 and couldn't read anymore kind of thing. So
I was actually excited to get into Castle of Otranto. I thought it was going to be great, and then I'm reading it and going, "This is garbage."
yeah, this is absolute bullshit. This was an ego trip for someone.
And then, well, the only one I've really DNF'd was Bones and Keeps, and that's
Yeah, that was a hard one to wrestle the book simultaneously, as well as try to get through I actually enjoyed that one, but again, I'm a person who really enjoys very dry literature, and I felt like
Glutton
while
for
it was,
punishment.
I am, but like, of the Lord of the Rings series, the Silmarillion was my favorite. I love the Silmarillion because I love that history. Like it's the world building and stuff, and I felt like you needed to do a lot of culture building in Bones and Keeps. And I appreciate those things because, like, I had known bits and pieces of, like, those northern country cultures and things, but to see them actually in action was really fascinating for me.
Yeah.
Because you know the concept, but to see someone who took the time to research it and build it into the culture that made sense and showed how it actually was I thought was very thoughtful. So I appreciated it a lot. But it was very hard to wrestle that book because design-wise it was very floppy and very large and very hard to hold and exhausting to hold because it was such a big book. But I actually really enjoyed the story because I do like slower literature sometimes,
Yeah.
where it kind of builds. It has to give you a lot of background. The only place it didn't work was That Hideous Strength. That was so slow. And half the time it's like, we get it already. We get the bad guys suck. We get that they're really good at gaslighting and emotional manipulation. We get that so-and-so is extremely insecure. And that's what they're feeding off of. You didn't have to spend 15 chapters building that up. You could have built it up in probably 3 chapters.
Yeah.
And had more action in between
That
instead of
book was just
blustering
one
it.
missed opportunity after another
really was.
through the whole thing.
It felt like a cop-out. Sorry, C.S. Lewis. I love most of your stuff, but that one
It
didn't
just
do it for me. Didn't do it for me.
So
Anyway,
one thing I want to quick discuss is my adventures with the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym and trying to secure a specific copy of it.
the saga continues.
I have the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym in that book I've displayed in our videos before, the complete tale and poems of Edgar Allan Poe. But I wanted to look into the nicer collectible copies. So the first thing I did is I got a hold of a copy of a Heritage Press edition from, I believe, the 1960s.
Yeah.
Really nice edition. But I wanted to be able to compare and contrast that with the Folio Society's edition that they did maybe about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I found somebody that listed it, and I purchased it. And was waiting for it to arrive. We got that weird publish on demand book
Yeah.
that I thought somebody was sending us as a gift.
Turns out it wasn't.
Turns out, no, that was the book I ordered. No, it wasn't the book I ordered. You look at the original ad, it was the
Yeah.
Folio Society edition. He didn't bother shipping me the Folio Society edition. He contacted some self-publisher in Michigan and sent me a self-published, and he got the cost of
A Folio
the
Society.
worth of the Folio Society edition. You know, so I paid like $80 for a book that's worth $20.
That's frustrating. You can
And
contest
the
that.
book, it's, I mean, those publish on demand, they're not poorly done, but they're not acid-free paper. They don't have beautiful colors. They're not fully illustrated. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I was buying. And I was expecting that, now the guy's, he's saying I can send it back and get my money back. But now, he's over in England.
Yeah,
I have
that's
to
a
send it
lot
back
of
to
money.
England.
That's
And since I purchased this, shipping costs between the U.S. and England have just skyrocketed.
Yeah.
So it's going to cost me another $50 to
yeah,
get the book
it's
back
not
to
worth
him.
it. Yeah, not worth it.
Worth it.
Nope.
But when you're on that used book market, beware what you're doing.
Yeah, that is.
There are people out there that are trying to take advantage of the current interest in collectible books, and they will screw you over.
Yeah, that is always, I think, and anytime you're working with anybody, say on eBay or any private seller through an online avenue, I think that's always a risk. Because you don't know if you're actually going to get what you're going to get. Like, I do that a lot too when I'm doing photography stuff or whatever. I buy a lot of dresses, and a lot of dresses do come pretty inexpensively from China. Sometimes they are exactly as they show. Sometimes they are not. And you're just sitting there like, okay, well, that was on me. But a lot of the time, I don't usually have a lot of issues where when I contact them and say, hey, like, especially on eBay, where I can just be like, hey, listen, like, I'm gonna give you a bad review otherwise, kind of thing. Like, this was not at all. Like, here's what you showed. This is what I got. World's different.
I hate when I buy men's shirts online and they come from China, because the way they make sleeves,
The
a
sizing
shirt
is
that's
different.
supposed to be for me, the sleeve will get extremely narrow through here and hang down to here.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things too that you have to run into sometimes with when you're buying those things online is that these people are ripping off artists who are like on Etsy or something. You never know if that's the thing. And I hate to perpetuate that problem sometimes. And like, sometimes you can't help it.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you need a thing and that's it, and you aren't gonna sit. I'm not gonna sit there and research it if I need it in a pinch and I need to get it as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
You know, kind of thing.
Well, and I just had another instance where I purchased a copy of The Witches of Eastwick. And I right away got an email back from the seller. It's not available. But he wanted me to go on to the website and cancel the order so that he wouldn't get bad marks. Well, why should I do that
Yeah.
when it was listed
You're the one
as
who
available,
inconvenienced me
and it's
by
not
not paying
available,
attention.
And now I have to take I mean, I'm not losing any money if I cancel the order, but it's just the thought that it's on me to make him look good.
Yeah, no, that's my
So
whole thing too.
here's
Is
what
like
he
a
did
private
is
seller.
I just ignored his email. So then he set up something in Apex where I'm going to get an extra $20 charge if I don't cancel it.